So expressionism is there, right? Expressionism is there, cubism is there, is there. Dadaism is again a radical departure for everything that was old. Right? Dadaism did not believe in this enlightenment idea of reason, reason bringing happiness to the society. Right? Enlightenment philosophers believe that rationality, rational thought, right? Scientism is going to bring a kind of happiness to society, right? Bring development to society. Right? But what happened in much of 20th century philosophy, right, is that there's a breakdown of Enlightenment philosophies. Right? There's a breakdown of Enlightenment philosophy. So Dada artists usually depicted something that was irrational, something that was non-rational. For example, in terms of poetry, there was no connection between the words and the meaning. Right? They found this words depicting a certain meaning. Right? They broke down this entire concept of words connected with their meaning. Right? Dadaism, a radical departure from everything that was rational, everything that was logical, right? Logocentric, right? Everything that was dependent on our rational development, reason, right? In a sense, they also forwarded uh, the cut-up method of depiction, right? What they said was, take, if you want to write a poem, take an article of the size that you uh, want your poem to be. Take that size of an article, you cut it out, right? And you cut out all the different words, put it in a bag, jumble it, take it out, and put them all together randomly. Right? And that will give some kind of meaning. Because human beings essentially cannot live in meaninglessness. They need some kind of a meaning, and they'll make meaning out of anything, out of any random arrangement of words. They also forwarded the collage method of writing. Right? It's a random coming together of words. It's a random stringing of words. Right? That'll give some kind of meaning. Right? That'll give some kind of meaning. Right? So Dadaism, you have Cubism. Cubism was essentially based on this kind of geometrical uh, geometrical figures. Right? It was based on geometrical figures. It was based on movement, but they did not depict anything that you could actually see from through your senses. Right? It was not an empirical method of depicting something. Right? It was not an empirical method of depicting something. One of the most famous painters associated with Cubism was, of course, Pablo Picasso. Right? In Picasso's painting, you'll find a kind of disintegration of the subject. Right? In modernist literature, you'll find both a disintegration and a recreation of the subject. Right? In art, as well as in paintings, as well as in literature, you'll find that what the artists are trying to do are they are trying to disintegrate the subject, disintegrate the subject, and also recreate the subject. Right? Disintegration and recreation is one of the major themes that you'll find in many of the modernist writings, particularly in again James Joyce. So Cubism, it believed in uh, movement. It was depicted through the geometrical figures, perfect geometrical figures. At the same time, Right? It tended to disintegrate the subject. Right? All the major body parts are jumbled up in this entire painting that you find. So you check Picasso's painting, you'll find how all of these are disintegrated. And if you ask Picasso why you're drawing this, he will tell you that it is not something that he sees that he depicts, right? Sees is that he depicts, right? All the traditional method of painting, which depicted an object as it is, which depicted a subject as it is, right? All the portraits that you find, all the paintings, in fact, that you find before the advent of cubism, before the advent of modernist art, right, is actually very relatable. Right? You can relate to the objects that are depicted. You can that are depicted in traditional paintings, but in modernist painting, in cubism, for example, you won't find a traditional representation, a mimetic representation of reality. Right? You will not find a mimetic representation of reality. They were extremely anti-realist. Right? This is one of the features of modernism. Right? One of the features of modernism is anti-realism. I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail later on. But I'm just providing all these different names of different movements and what they stood for. Right? After Dadaism and Cubism came uh, Surrealism. Right? Surrealism, according to Andre Breton, was a kind of super reality. It was a mixture of the unconscious and the conscious. Right? It was a mixture of the unconscious and the conscious. I won't be actually getting into Freud but Freud, Nietzsche before him, and Marx in between. Right? Nietzsche, Marx, Freud, all of these three philosophers, right, were considered the masters of doubt. Right? Paul Ricoeur, if you read Ricoeur's writings, you'll find he talks about the three masters of suspicion, the three masters of doubt. And these three people, in turn, influenced much of modernist art. So, surrealism was influenced directly by Freudian concept of unconscious. What the surrealists did was they mixed together fantasies, the unconscious, and conscious mind, brought them together, the unconscious and the conscious mind, right? Reality and dream. They mixed reality and dream together and formed a kind of super realism, right? It is called a kind of super realism. If you look at Dali, for example, right? Surrealism was again influenced by Dadaism and Cubism, right? If you look at Dali's painting, right? If you look at Dali's painting, right? I keep forgetting the name of the painting. It's called, I think, something to do with memory. Right? It has something to do with memory. And if you look at the painting, you'll see clocks that are fading away, that are melting away. Right? Not fading away, but melting away. Right? Clothes, clocks are like clothes put on hangers, right? Put on wires, right? And they are melting away, right? So you find a kind of dream scene mixed with something that is part of your objective reality. A clock is a part of your objective reality. But at the same time, they what Dali did was he melted the clocks. Right? Right? So there is a kind of objective reality and there is a kind of fantastic dream imagery that he conquers. Dali also, in fact, uh, famously collaborated with Buñuel. Buñuel is a major surrealist when it comes to films. Buñuel, Bunuel. Buñuel. Buñuel again, if you look at their first collaboration, Andalusian Doll, you'll find this aspect of unconscious dream imagery, right, combined with what you call objective reality. Right? I say what you call objective reality because, in a sense, many of these movements discredited the entire of reality as such, the entire concept of foundational reality, foundational objective reality, which has to be somehow mimetically represented, right? which should be, which are represented, like in the realist works. In a sense, surrealism, cubism, right? All of them are entirely anti-realist, right? The anti-realist, they're also anti-naturalist. Right? They're also anti-naturalist. I'll talk about again anti-realism, anti-naturalism are some of the features of modernism, some of the major features of modernism. Right. So you have, I already talked about the radicalism of futurism. I talked about cubism, uh, talked about surrealism, Dadaism, expressionism again is a reliance on not a reliance on outwardness, right? A way of depicting colors and scenes, right? Colors and scenes, in a sense, are much more important. They are depicted. The formalist elements of a depiction are much more important for the expressionists, right? It is much more important. Expressionism also refers to certain moods through these outward formalist elements. Right? These formalist elements, outward formalist elements, right, make you think about a certain kind of mood, a certain kind of mood, expressionism. Right? You also have imagism, which was again forwarded by right. Uh, you have Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound forwarded the concept of image, which is again related with the concept of Vorticism that he forwarded. Vorticism or imagism. Imagism, Vorticism. Right? He tends to separate imagism, symbolist school. Right? He separates imagism with symbolism. Right? He separates imagism with symbolism by stating that in imagism, right? In imagism, a word could have different meanings, right? Different connotations. While in symbolist poetry, a symbol, right, depicted as a word could only depict a certain kind of reality. Right? Uh, Cross, bearing the cross, for example, right? Talks about the symbol of bearing the cross, right? Going through hardships. You cannot make any other, uh, you cannot think of anything else that could explain the symbol of the cross, right? You cannot think of anything else, right? There is a fixity to the symbols that you find in the symbolist movement. Right? According to Ezra Pound, right? Symbolist movement is obviously much more complex. Right? It works with association. Right? Certain descriptions are uh, associated with, again, certain kinds of moods. Right? Certain kinds of moods. Right? So it is complicated. List is not as simple as saying that uh, the symbols are fixed in a sense. Right? Uh, anyway, imagism breaks away, according to Ezra Pound, it breaks away from the symbolist mode of representation, where the image, one single image, could mean a lot of different things. For example, in his famous poem, The Return, Ezra Pound's The Return, right? In The Return, you'll find he uses this word at the very end of the poem. Right? He uses this word Haie, Haie. Right? By the way, the return actually talks about the return of the old gods, right? The return of the old gods to the modern world, who are not able to uh, function properly or connect with this modern world. Right? So this is what you find. So he uses this word called high, Haie. Right? High could mean different things depending on the context. Right? Depending on the context, it could mean different things. And all the different meanings that you find are could be associated, could be found in that single poem. That single poem, you'll find this that has diverse connotations, and you can use any of the connotations to explain the poem, to interpret the poem. Right? High could mean offense. Right? High with an exclamation point could mean a command by the gods given to the dogs. Right? High could mean any of these things. Right? It could mean any of these things in the context of the poem, not only outside the context, but in the context of the poem itself, it could mean different things. Right? Imagism. Right? Imagism. Right? So all these different movements are part of what you call modernism or modernisms. Right? It would be wrong on our singular modernism. It would be wrong to use a singular modernism because it depicts, it includes a lot of different movements, a lot of different movements, right, that are opposed to each other sometimes, right? Sometimes they are also opposed to each other. All these different movements do not have the same agenda, the same objective, the same method of representation, but differing methods of representation. They have differing objectives. Futurism, for example, celebrates technology. Right? It celebrates the speed of the machine. Right? It celebrates the speed of the machine. Right? Marinetti, if you read the Futurist Manifesto, you'll see that he celebrates the speed of the machine. He celebrates the advent of modern life, celebrates the advent of modern life, coming of modern life, the age of machines. Right? He celebrates the age of machines. He celebrates technology. You won't find this aspect in some of the other movements. Some of the other movements, you will not find this kind of a radical aspect. In fact, many of the movements were hugely disturbed by the age of machines, the coming of machines, right? The mechanistic viewpoint of nature, the mechanistic underlying uh, feature of nature. Right? They try to write against this mechanistic aspect. They try to write against the age of the coming of the age of machines. They try to write against technology. If you read D.H. Lawrence, for example, or even if you read T.S. Eliot, you'll find this kind of a despair. Despair uh, regarding the the ubiquitousness of technology, right? All enveloping sense of technology, right? So you'll find in D.H. Lawrence, for example, you'll find a movement backwards. In T.S. Eliot, for example, you'll find a movement backwards. Right? There's always a backward glance. Right? Walter Benjamin, for example, talks about the advent of modernity. Right? It is essential again that we separate the term modernism from modernity. Right? Modernity is different from modernism. Modernity was a term first used by Baudelaire. Right? Baudelaire, the symbolist poet, he used the term modernity. Modernity is different from modernism. You can say is directed towards modernity, is a response to modernity. Modernity, if modernism is an artistic uh, movement, modernity is a social, economic, historical makeup of a period. Right? It is the overwhelming, overarching makeup of a period. Right? You're talking about a particular social condition. Right? You're talking about a very particular social condition. Right? Baudelaire, in fact, who used the term for the first time in the picture of modern life. Again, you could also read the picture of modern life. You'll find the PDF of it. Picture of modern life, and also his other essays, which talk about uh, this concept of modernity. Modernity as being, in terms of art, modernity is something that is fleeting, right? That is not permanent. Right? It is something that is contingent. It is something that is fleeting. It is not permanent. It is impermanent. Right? Right? If you want to connect modernity with art, you have to talk about fleeting, contingent, something that is not permanent. Right? So modernity is a social condition. Right? Modernity is a particular social condition. Right? Modernity is depicted by this rise of urbanization, the rise of technology, the rise of this industrial society. Right? All of these aspects are part of what you call modernity. It has to be separated from the term modernism. Modernism is merely, not merely, but it is one of it is a response to modernity. It is a response to modernity, right? The rise of urbanization, right? That is why many of these modernist works are based in the city, right? Are based in the city, and they are always, not always, but almost always talking from the point of view, the city from the point of view, picturized from the point of view of an author, right? Or someone with the sensibilities of a writer, right? Someone with the sensibilities of an artist, right? Someone with the sensibilities of an artist. And it also depicts, all the modernist works depicts this kind of alienation that you find between the individual and the society, right? Between the individual artist and the society. Right. So this kind of despair that you find in modernist writings, right? This kind of despair that you find in modernist writings could be found in, uh, could not be found in futurist writings. Futurism celebrates, right, what other modernist writers despair about, right? There's a very acute of despair that you find in T.S. Eliot, for example. Right? If you read The Wasteland, you'll find this image of the London Bridge where people are walking on the London Bridge. Right? So many, I had not thought so many had been undone by death. Right? Been undone by death. There is death in life. Right? There's death in life. Right? There's death in life. There's also life, and there's right. People are dead. Right? While they're walking on the London Bridge, they're also dead. So you find a kind of despair of this development, the entire Enlightenment process of development. Right? So you'll find a despair in certain modernist writers that you won't find in certain other modernist writers. So they are opposed to each other in a sense. Right? But they all gave birth to new ways of looking at the world. Right? Picasso did not paint something that he could actually see with his eyes. Picasso painted what he perceived in the eye of his mind. Right? What he perceived in the eye of his mind, that is what he painted. Right? If you look at some of the early paintings of Picasso, when he was a child, for example, you'll find that he started off by drawing all these traditional paintings. But later on, with his association with Cubism, you'll find that there's a radical departure from everything that is considered traditional, right? From the realist mode of depiction. Right? It broke away from a realist mode of depiction. Now, in terms of literary modernism, uh, it is important to establish at least some kind of timeline because modernism could be a time bound concept. It could also be a concept bound, a genre bound concept. It could be a genre bound concept. Right? For example, if you have to talk about the timeline of modernism, most people would say it started from the 1890s with the decadent movement, right? The decadent movement in France, which is again called aesthetic movement in England. Right? They're basically the same thing. The ugliness of nature depicted through the beauty of words in terms of literature, the beauty of colors, vibrant colors in terms of paintings. But it depicted the fall of mankind. Right? It depicted the breakdown of society. Right? So the decadent movement, end of 19th century, right? 1890s, beginning from the 1890s to 1930s. Right? 1930. According to some people, it is also 1940. According to some people, it is also uh, end set in 1940. If you consider James Joyce's uh, uh, last work, if you consider Finnegan's Wake as a modernist work of art, you would say because it was published in 1939, so maybe 1940. According to some people, the different critics give you different timelines, 1890 to 1930. I prefer to think that it started in the mid 19th century with the Symbolist movement. Symbolist movement is a major precursor to modernist writings. In fact, uh, T.S. Eliot was influenced by the reading of Symbolist poets. He was influenced by Verlaine, for example. Verlaine was a Symbolist poet. Right? He was influenced by uh, the Symbolist poets. Now, symbolism, uh, as I already, I think, referred to symbolism, the Symbolist movement started in France in the mid 19th century, and some of the major poets associated with the movement were Baudelaire, Verlaine, Rimbaud, uh, Rimbaud. Even I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's Rimbaut. M is pronounced as A, but I don't know how to pronounce the R in French. So Rimbaud, I call him Rimbaud. So Rimbaud's Drunken Boat, for example, right? And Baudelaire uh, Correspondences. Right? He wrote a poem called Correspondences. So Correspondences acts as a kind of manifesto of the symbolist movement. Right? It acts. If you read Correspondence is a relatively small poem. You could just check it online, right? Where he talks about this temple of symbols, right? Connecting again, movement is again breaking away from this kind of exterior reality, right? Finding some kind of a spiritual meaning in life, symbols, right? Finding some kind internal inner meaning, a subjective meaning through symbols. Right? He was also bothered by this, by the influence of science, right? Which only talked about empirical facts, which only talked about things that you could actually observe, things that you could actually measure as being the only valid forms of experience. Right? Only valid forms of experience in scientific terms are something that could be observed, that could be experimented. Right? That is essentially what you mean by an empirical method. An empirical method is a combination of observation and experimentation. Right? So it began with the symbolist movement, with uh, Baudelaire providing the non-official kind of manifesto to the movement in his poem Correspondences. Right? You have Berlin, Mallarmé, Rambo. Rambo stopped writing much earlier. He was very young when he stopped writing completely. Uh, anyway, he's considered a major uh, symbolist. So T.S. Eliot, in fact, uh, read this book on symbolism by Arthur Simmons. Right? He wrote a book. He read a book on symbolism, and then he was influenced by the poetry of Verlaine, specifically the poetry of Verlaine. So symbolism is again considered part of this modernist movement simply because it tried to find something that was internal, that something that was inner, as opposed to external, right? As opposed to external. This is one of the features of symbolist poetry that uh, that made it part of the modernist movement. So it began in the mid 19th century with symbolism, and then decadence or decadent movement or aesthetic movement which focused on art for art's sake. Right? What uh, decadence or aesthetic movement did was completely reject the outer world. Right? Completely reject the outer world. Only talk about of uh, in a sense, the inner world that they created. So you'll find in the character of uh, Stephen Dedalus, for example, the character of Stephen Dedalus in James Joyce's books, you'll find that in Portrait of the Artist as a young man, he is an aesthete. Right? He is someone who has an aesthetic bent of mind. Right? You'll also find his famous theory of aestheticism in the last chapter of Portrait of the Artist. Right. So you have uh, the timeline is it began in the mid 19th century and it kept on going till 1930. As you know, 1922 is considered a landmark year in terms of modernist writings. Right? Wasteland was published, Ulysses was published, Jacob's Room was published. So these are all landmark works that were all published in 1922. So this is a basic timeline that you can give if you consider modernism to be a time-bound concept. If you considered it to be a genre-bound concept, you have to include many of the writers from previous periods, right? Earlier periods. You have to include Lawrence Sterne, for example, Tristram Shandy. Tristram Shandy is a modernist work, a radical modernist work. Right? It is a radical modernist work. Lawrence Sterne. Right? You also have to consider Blake, who did not fit into any of the movements properly. Right? He is called a pre-romantic, sometimes a romantic, but Blake also had elements in his poetry. His own philosophy is something that again influenced uh, the modernist writers. Right? Yeats was influenced by Blake. Eliot was influenced by Blake. Even Joyce was influenced by Blake. Many of the modernist writers were influenced by Blake, specifically with the theory of contraries, theory of oppositions, right? The interplay of oppositions, the interplay of contraries. So it could be a concept bound, a genre bound movement. Right? Need not necessarily put it in a specific timeline. You can also go to other writers who were distinctly modern. Hence, if you use the term modern, modern again is derived from the term modo meaning something that is current. In that sense, all the major movements that broke away from tradition are considered to be modern. Romanticism, romantic poetry also was considered to be modern at one point of time. So you cannot actually categorize uh, anything as distinctly modern, but still, uh, if you read Ezra Pound, right, I find Ezra Pound's uh, essays to be, uh, much more interesting. So now we go to the features of modernism. I already told you some of the major features that you find in modernist writing specifically is that they are experimental, highly experimental in terms of form, in terms of matter. They are highly experimental, they are elliptical, right? Elliptical. In fact, if you have to read James Joyce, if you want to read James Joyce, you have to be an active reader in order to fill up the gaps, in order to fill up the ellipses that you find in his writings. Anyway, moving on to the features of modernism. One of the features of modernism, as I already told you, is this kind of anti-realism that you find. Right? Anti-realism. Why is it anti-realism? In order to understand why it is anti-realism, you have to somehow understand the concept of realism itself. Right? Realism believed in a it believed in a mimetic representation of reality, right? It believed in uh, depicting the objective reality around them, right? Faithfully, depicting faithfully the objective reality. The problem with realism is that there are certain assumptions being made in realist fiction. Right? And realist, you cannot, you can also talk about realism as a kind of mindset as well. It is not simply a form of a genre of literature. It could also be a kind of mindset. Right? Many non-professional, let's say, non-professional readers of literature do not read literature as they don't read literature as students of literature, right? They, what they do when they pick up a book is that they want to find some semblance of reality in those books. They want to find some reality in those books, right? Some kind of a reality, some kind of an objective reality that they could associate with, right? That is the realist bent of mind. Right? On the other hand, right, realism has this assumption. It gives you a kind of illusion that it is faithfully representing reality. What it does, in fact, what it neglects, in fact, is this inner inbuilt assumptions, biases that are part of realist fiction. One of the major realist writers that you find is Daniel Defoe. In Defoe's writings, there's always a kind of bias, there's always a kind of agenda that he's pushing forward as being real. Right? If you consider Robinson Crusoe to be real, that means the assumption that white European man is superior to the Caribbean tribes or the African tribes. Right? You will also have to agree with that. Right? These are the biases, these agendas that are neglected by the realist writers. Right? So in realism, you find these kinds of assumptions that are inbuilt within them. Right? You cannot escape from those kinds of assumptions. It neglects these kinds of assumptions. Anyway, many of the movements that I talked about in modernism broke away from this realist mind. Right? It broke away from this realist bent of mind. In that, they depicted something that is inward rather than something that is outward, external. Right? They depicted something that was in rather than something that is outward. Some people even consider modernist writings to be more real than realism. Right? They're more real than realism rather than being realistic as the realist writers. They depict something that is much more real than realism. Right? If you consider realism, right? If you consider, take for example, if it is very confusing, I believe. Take for example Robinson Crusoe. Right? Robinson Crusoe is met with certain hurdles, right? Certain things in the environment that form the character of Robinson. Robinson Crusoe is, in a sense, nothing in at the beginning of the novel. He's only formed as the novel progresses. He's formed by the hurdles he encounters, right? The hardships that he encounters, right? The shipwrecks, constant shipwrecks, and his stay on the island. That is where he learns, he creates himself, right? In the model of a materialist man, right? He creates himself in a sense, right? His identity is formed by this external environment, right? It is formed by an external environment. The modernists, in fact, have an inward bent of mind. Right? The modernist writers, such as Joyce or T.S. Eliot, they have an inward bent of mind. Right? They talk about a certain kind of inner consciousness, right, that drives the characters. Right? The characters are driven by something that is inner, internal, inner consciousness. Right? They are driven by something that is inner. Right? This is again a response uh, to naturalism. Right? This is again a response to naturalism. Naturalism, as you know, was forwarded by the concept is forwarded by Emile Zola, right? Emile Zola, the French novelist, right? So Emile Zola wrote a very important uh, essay, which is called the experimental novel, right? The experimental novel, where he talks about uh, a extremely realist, scientific, fact-based literature, right? A realist, right? The difference between realism and naturalism is that naturalism has a higher degree of the difference is in terms of degree. Right? Realism, for example, you'll always find in realism that there is some kind of an objective in realism. There's a didactic purpose that you find in realism that you don't find in naturalism. Right? In naturalism, you don't find didactic function of literature. Right? What the naturalists do is they experiment with the phenomena. Phenomena here, in terms of novel, being the characters. Right? Create the characters, right? And the characters are driven by their environment, like in the realist novels, right? They're also driven by their heredity, for example, right? When they don't depict anything that is not natural, that does not follow the laws of nature, right? That does not follow the laws of nature. They always everything has to follow the laws of nature. Right? In realist fiction, particularly since I keep talking about Robinson Crusoe, take for example again Robinson Crusoe. Right?
Hello.
Uh,
Ah,
it got muted actually, my audio.
okay, okay. Now it's audible. Carry on.
Uh, okay. So I was talking about the naturalist literature, naturalist novels. Right? Now, in naturalism, naturalism gives priority to something that is logical, that follows the laws of nature. Right? It was again, in turn, influenced by the wider positivist movement, right? Positivist philosophy, right? Positivist philosophy in terms of science, right? In terms of science, positivist philosophy rejects everything that does not follow the laws of nature, right? Right? In a sense, it rejects metaphysics of any kind, fantasy of any kind. Right? All characters follow the laws of nature. Right? You might say that even Hardy, in that sense, could be considered, but he is not considered naturalist simply because of, for example, the function of nature that you find in his books, right? In his novels. In test, you find that nature plays a function, plays a role in the novels. Right? Naturalist works don't have that. Right? That would be not following the laws of nature. Right? So, in the experimental novel, uh, uh, Emile Zola forwards this concept of naturalism. Right? Naturalism. Naturalism is again something that is fact-based, something that is highly scientific. There's a scientific way of representing a character. A character is first observed in his natural habitat, and then experimentations are made in terms of situation. Right? He is again, like in the realist novel, they again focus on the hardships suffered by the protagonist of uh, the novel. So one of the important features that you find in modernist writings is this inward bent of consciousness. Right? Inward bent of consciousness, which was again influenced by uh, Henry Bergson. Henry Bergson is probably the most important philosopher who influenced much of modernist literature. Right? Much of modernist literature was influenced by the theories of intuition, the theories of duration, the theory of memory that is forwarded by Henry Bergson. Henry Bergson created a systematic philosophy which influenced, which formed, in fact, literary modernism, the fun of literary modernism, right? In that, Henry Bergson, since there's no time, Henry Bergson rejected this harsh realism of naturalism. He rejected the harsh realism of naturalism. He rejected, in fact, the Darwinian theory of natural selection, the Darwinian theory of evolution, right? By suggesting that there is some kind of an inner consciousness, an inner energy that has helped the process of evolution, right? Not natural selection solely, right? Not natural selection, but there is something that is inward. Right? You'll also find a similar kind of theory in Samuel Butler. Right? Samuel Butler, who wrote The Way of All Flesh, for example. Right? Samuel Butler wrote explicitly against the Darwinian theory of natural selection, the Darwinian theory of evolution, by talking about the mind. Right? It is the mind that gave birth to this kind of, right? This process of evolution is heralded, is propelled by the mind. Right? How do you explain? You can explain the evolution of bodies. How can you explain the evolution of the mind? Right? So Henry Bergson talks about this intuitive forms of consciousness. Right? He talks about intuition. Right? He talks about some kind of an inner inbuilt energy, right? Some kind of a vital energy, right? That is then depicted by the modernist writers. Right? They also depict, focus mainly on bit of memory. Right? They also focus on memory. Memory is again an important concept, but I'm not getting into too much detail right now. Bergson also forwarded, if you talk about the time, the depiction of time in modernist writings, you'll again have to go back to Bergson. Bergson is the one who forwarded the theory of the subjective internal time, which he called dure. Dure meaning duration. This internal time, not external time, internal time. External time is always linear, right? One after the other. Now it is 12:30, it'll be 1:30, 2:30, 3:30. It is linear, back and forth, right? It can go back and forth, right? That is why in modernist writings you'll always have a backward glance, right? T.S. Eliot will always have a backward glance. He will keep making reference to all these great writers, right? So memory, the concept of duration are all part of modernist writings. They're all part of features that we talked about was anti-realism, anti-naturalism. Instead of realism, what they forwarded was perspectivism. Perspectivism refers to uh, uh, the meaning of reality, uh, or the meaning, the multifaceted meaning that we find, right? Multifaceted reality that we encounter. Right? There are different perspectives. Reality is only formed by those perspectives. If you read, for example, Faulkner's As I Lay Dying, you'll find there's multiple perspectives. Right? Every chapter from the perspective of one character. Many of the times they're talking about the same event, the same situation, right? In different perspectives. Right? In different perspectives. That was lacking in realism, literary realism. So anti-realism, instead of realism, they forward perspectivism. Anti-naturalism, naturalism was a scientific mode of writing literature, a scientific fact-based mode of writing literature, which was again rejected by the modernist writers, right? By the modernist writers, by talking about something that is internal, right? Something that is internal. Third one is this inward mind of inward bent of consciousness. Right. So I hope that it was helpful. At least I don't know how much it was helpful, but thank you.
Hemant sir, thank you for such wonderful insights on modernism. You have talked about many aspects of modernism, starting from its different isms associated with the term, and along with that some characteristics and the other modernist thinkings. So I'd like to take some questions, a few questions maybe, since it's a long session, and if you have some questions, please unmute the button of your microphone and ask Hemant sir. Okay, we'll take some few questions, please. Hello, anyone having some questions? Please you can ask on. You just need to unmute your microphone and ask Hemant
Hello.
sir the question.
Hello.
Hello.
Sir,
Yes.
please kindly define expressionism. Expressionism is
Yeah,
in English
we can
literature.
hear you.
Sir, please define
Sorry, can you?
expressionism
Yes,
in
yes,
English.
yes, yes.
Okay, sir.
So expressionism evokes certain moods or ideas. Right? Expressionism does not focus solely on the physical reality as such. Right? It does not solely rely on external physical reality. The physical reality, in a sense, expresses the meaning of emotional experience, right? Some kind of an emotional experience, right? So it evokes certain ideas. Right? So expressionist, you'll find. I'll give you an example of that. You'll find, for example, in Kafka's writings, in Trial, for example, there are a lot of his novels that have expressionist elements. Right? Take Trial, for example. Right? The location of the coup is important, as well the labyrinthine nature of the location that he provides, right, is somehow representative of his as well. Right? There is some kind of an inner confusion that is associated with that labyrinthine lanes of the location of the courtrooms. Right? There is this kind of confusion at the very beginning of the novel. For example, he is arrested, but he is not given the reason why he is arrested. So throughout the entire novel, he doesn't know why he is arrested. So there is this kind of confusion that is also somehow seeps into this kind of physical reality. Right? You can also find this very famous uh, painting called The Scream. Right? Edward Munch. Edward Munch's The Scream. Right? The Scream does not depict anything that is real as such. Right? There's this vague figure that you find who is screaming, but you don't actually associate it with an actual person. You associate it with certain kind of mood, certain kind of emotional experience. Right?
Thank you. Sir, I have one more question. May I ask about the research writing?
Research.
Research writing. Sir, actually, I want to know about how to reference a internet website in my research when I have taken one paragraph from internet website directly. It will be plagiarism or not?
See, that is not the scope of this lecture, so I can't answer you that.
Okay, sir.
If you, whatever you refer to, you have to give proper citations. That's all.
Okay, okay. Thanks. That's all.
Anyone else, please? Uh, Hemant, I just wanted to inquire one particular thing in your lecture. Do you think the devastation and the dissolution of Western civilization after the World War One actually accelerated and deepened the modernist thinking, because it's visible in the beginning of 20th century. The modernism is visible, but do you think actually the World War it accelerated and deepened the thinking, the modernistic thinking?
Yes, because the war actually put forward this, in a sense, in a very visual, gave a very visual reality of the failure of Enlightenment ideas. Enlightenment, which talked about scientific progress. Right? What did it give birth to? They talked about progress and happiness, but what did it amount to? All this rationalism that you talk about, it gave birth to this entire war. The war was fought on rationalist basis. In fact, when you talk about the missiles, for example, the missiles are mathematically precise. So all these rationalist elements you'll find in the fighting of the war itself. So there is a failure of Enlightenment ideals, which depend, but at the same time, you'll find that the war actually uh, destroyed many of the modernist movements that I talked about. Dadaism, for example, uh, could not compete with the disillusionment of the war. So it got disbanded before the end of the war. Dadaism, even I don't know, Cubism maybe, but the surrealism in fact kept alive this entire Dadaist tradition.
Thank you. Anyone else is having any queries? Please. Okay, since there are no other questions or queries, thank you, Hemant. Thank you, Hemant, sir, for your such a wonderful lecture. It's great to listen to you every time I listen to you. Thank you for such a insightful thoughts on modernism. Thank you. Then we'll move to our second session. In the second session, we have Dr. Athira session. Athira talking about Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion. Dr. Athira Sisudhan, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah.
Can I turn my camera on?
Yeah, you put your camera on and your microphone on.
Oh. There is some technical issue.
No,
I don't know, it's showing video is not working. We couldn't use it. Can I rejoin?
Yeah, you leave and turn your camera on. Just
let me do it. Oh, I don't know.
I request other participants, please turn off your camera and then you unmute or mute your microphone, please. I request other participants, please mute your camera, mute your microphone and turn off your camera, please.
Hello, Amit. I'm trying to do that.
Okay. You
don't know what has
you
happened.
just leave the. Okay.
One second.
You leave. You leave it and once again you join. I'm requesting other participants, please turn off your camera and let our speaker join first.
Sure. Do you know how to do that? I'm trying here. Any other options to do that?
Do one thing. No, you do one thing. I'm removing you and you
Okay.
join again, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, now
Oh,
you
my God.
turn on your camera.
I tried again. Oh my God, I don't know what's the problem. Oh, another app is already using your camera.
Please, I'm requesting other participants, please turn off your camera. Please turn off your camera. I'm requesting other users, other participants, please turn off your camera.
Oh, what is it? I think it's okay now. Hamid, hello?
Hello.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Check. Sorry for the trouble.
Okay, no need. So we have Dr. Athiya Sesharan. She is an assistant professor in Devashambod College from Kollam, Kerala. She will be talking about George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion. We'll not waste our time. Over to you, Athiya, ma'am.
Can I start now?
Yeah, you can. You are good to go.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Imagine inviting me to this online lecture series and giving me this great opportunity to talk to all of you who are from different parts of the nation. It's really good to replenish our mind and brain during this coronavirus pandemic time. Thank you, Ahmed, for your generosity in organizing this lecture series. I would also like to thank the participants. I would like to tell you one thing. I know the participants belong to different levels of learning. So please bear with me. I have this lecture from graduate students level of learning. So I'll give an introduction to Bernard Shaw's play, Pygmalion, so that it would make it easier for the students or just class when they teach this play. To begin with, Bernard Shaw is one of the most prolific and important Irish playwrights. He developed an extraordinary independence of mind and spirit due to some family background which he had. He always had a concern for mankind and its affairs.
Excuse me,
And
ma'am.
without,
Your voice is echoing.
yes,
Voice is not clear to anyone.
sorry. Is there any
Hello,
problem?
may I request all the users except for the speaker to mute their microphone. Only the speaker, madam, will unmute, but I request all the other participants to please mute their microphone. That is causing some technical hurdle. So I request all the participants to kindly mute their microphone. Hello.
Hello.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Hello.
Madam, am I audible to you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, now you can go ahead. Yes.
But yeah,
Me,
one problem echoing is there.
yeah. For that, ma'am, other participants they have to unmute their. No. You have to
Mute
unmute
them.
your microphone. Yeah. Just give me a second. I will just fix it. Uh,
Yeah, sure. I'll do
I
it.
Yeah, I request all the participants to please mute their video and audio devices because this will cause interference for broadcasting. And meanwhile, I request only the speaker to speak and then we'll be able to hear. Madam, will you be able to log in again so that we'll fix the problem?
Okay. Yeah, you can do that, please.
Yeah. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Are you audible to me now?
Yes.
Is it echoing?
Yes. Yeah, still it is echoing.
Can you please lower the volume of your mic, please?
Okay.
In your computer, yeah. Please
Yeah,
lower the
sure.
volume of your mic.
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, slightly more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it okay
Is
now?
it echoing now? Hello.
Yeah, but is it
Yeah,
audible
it
for
is okay now.
others?
Yes, it is audible for us, ma'am. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Meanwhile, I
you.
request all the participants. Meanwhile, I request again all the participants to kindly mute their video and audio devices so that we will not be having any interference in the recording and broadcasting. Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's start now. I'll begin with introducing Bernard Shaw as a playwright. He is one of the most prolific and important developed an extraordinary independence of mind and spirit, mainly due to his family backgrounds. He always had a concern for mankind and its affairs without being distracted by any customs or any conventional ideas of right and wrong. And he considered art as didactic, means he wanted art to be instructive. And he began his writing career as a critic of music and plays. And those essays which he has written were of very high quality. Writing in the year 1885. So when he started writing the plays, the love of music, which he has inherited from his mother, helped him write with rhythmical ease. So for that reason, very long speeches, which he has included in his works, it became so popular, or the reader never felt any boredom reading all those long speeches. It's due to that rhythmical ease. Then later, after settling in London, he coming to talk about the ideas, he started supporting socialist ideals and so founded Fabian Society, which is a socialist society founded in the year 1884 in London. So the members of Fabian Society, they wanted to bring about gradual evolutionary change and not a violent revolution. They wanted a gradual evolutionary change to happen. So those people, they tried socialist state. He was involved in that. It is Fabian Society, a socialist society founded in the year 1884 in London. And Bernard Shaw, he stood as a champion of intellectual freedom. He talks about particular kind of a spirit that inspires human beings to struggle upward. And he calls that spirit as life force in his works. You can see that while reading his works. So he called that spirit that moves human beings upward as life force. And he went on to write plays. It's about real human problems. That's why he considered art as didactic. He didn't consider art as for art's sake. So he wrote plays about real human problems, and he took current social, political, and religious problems as subjects for his plays. And he was writing like this because he was greatly influenced by the Norwegian playwright Henrik Ibsen. He was called as a father of realism. So Bernard Shaw was greatly influenced by this Norwegian playwright Henrik Ibsen. Henrik Ibsen wrote plays discussing public affairs, just like Bernard Shaw. And Bernard Shaw won Nobel Prize in 1925. Then coming to some of his interests, Bernard Shaw's interest, we need it for reading this play. It would help in proper reading of this play. Bernard Shaw was interested in the sound of words. I told you before he had love for music. So he has inherited it from his mother. Her entire life was devoted for music. So Shaw was always interested in the sound of, and he had an opinion that the unphonetic nature of English language. Hope you know what is phonetics. Phonetics is the study of speech sounds. So English is an unphonetic language. So Shaw had that opinion. The unphonetic nature of English language means a variety of different sounds in English. It's being represented by same alphabets. For example, we'll take two words, cuff and plow. When we spell the words, we say it as COUGH, and we pronounce it as cuff. Next word is PLOUGH, and we pronounce it as plow. So the ending, if you look at the endings of both these words, it looks similar. We use the same both those words, OUGH, but we pronounce it in different ways. So English language has got this problem. It is unphonetic. We may use same alphabets for different, for different sounds. So Bernard Shaw was unhappy with this. So he opined that the unphonetic nature of English language, it makes English harder to learn and use. Still, that problem exists. So he learned shorthand. Shorthand is based more on phonetics. Means it uses the same symbol for the same sound. We know that now in phonetics, we have International Phonetic Alphabet. We have 44 speech sounds, phonetic alphabets. It represents each sound. So it solves this problem of this unphonetic nature of English. So then he learned shorthand, which is based on phonetics, for writing works, since he was unhappy with this problem of English language. He left most of his fortune to pay the expenses of starting his new phonetic alphabet. Now, coming to the title of this play, the play is entitled Pygmalion, a Romance in 5 Acts. He took the title from a Greek legend of Pygmalion, who is a talented Greek sculptor from the island of Cyprus. So this character, Pygmalion, the sculptor, he despises women in general. But when he made a statue of a woman, later he made a statue of a woman, and he fell deeply in love with this beautiful statue, which he made out of ivory. And he started treating this sculpture like adorning it with fine clothes and jewelry. And he named her Galatea, Galatea. The word meaning will quiet. So when he finished the statue's features, he couldn't take his eyes off. So later he visited the temple of Aphrodite. You know, Aphrodite is the Greek goddess of love. And he prayed asking that, and the statue resembled the goddess. So she decided to give life to Pygmalion's creation. So on his return from the temple, he touched his sculpture that's named Galatea. The statue turned into a living woman who then later becomes Pygmalion's wife. So that's a Greek legend. So it's from this legend, he took this title, Pygmalion, a Romance in 5 Acts. Now we'll discuss about some characters in this play. Henry Higgins. Henry Higgins, he is the professor of phonetics. This professor represents Pygmalion, the sculptor from that legend. Now, the female character is Eliza. The full name is Eliza Doolittle. We can call her Eliza or Lisa. She's an uneducated flower seller girl. She represents the statue woman from the legend Galatea. So this work portrays the unique transformation of this flower seller girl, Elisa or Lisa. The transformation of this flower seller girl from a gutter snipe to a so-called duchess. Gutter snipe, she's coming from that background, lower background. She's an uneducated flower seller girl. So her transformation from gutter snipe to a duchess. So the stories like this, I won't summarize the thing, but the important points. After making a bet with his friend, Colonel Pickering, he's also another linguist. So after making a bet to his friend, Professor Higgins, he decides to do experiment with this flower seller girl of changing the speech of that girl. Her speech is called as Cockney. Cockney means it's a dialect. We know that there will be many dialects in each country. The different dialects spoken in different regions. So her dialect is Cockney, Cockney. Cockney dialect spoken by working class people there. So is changing the speech of this Cockney girl. And one more feature, I'll describe the feature of this dialect. Cockneys speak without opening their mouths. And their jaws don't move freely. The vowels are not pure. Their words run together. So it doesn't sounds good. Doesn't sound good. Professor Higgins believed that after this experiment, he is planning to do an experiment. It would pass her off as a duchess in 6 months' time. So now she is a flower seller girl. After his he believes that it would turn her to a duchess. And he's planning to change her speech. Then Higgins also believes that when the experiment gets finished, she can move along with cultured and aristocratic people without anyone detecting or suspecting her belonging to a different social class. Sure that no one will find her or find her social class. So after the completion of the experiment, Professor Higgins, he thinks of sending this girl back to her old way of life because his experiment is over. So there start the troubles for the girl. And because she is taught to speak properly, she got transformed to a different plane, and she developed a desire for a better life. Because there was that 6 months time, a lot of changes happened to that girl. So she got entirely transformed to a different plane, and a bond is also created between the Professor Higgins and the girl. When she was a flower girl, she was having an undeveloped mind and emotions, which made her more or less like a statue. But Higgins made her alive, and she emerged as a new woman. So that's a important term, a new woman, a liberated woman. Higgins is not in love with her, but she doesn't take it in that way. So when coming to the title again, we told it is Pygmalion, a romance in 5 acts. But actually it is not. So the title is ironical. It is not a romance as present in the title. It would have been called so if Higgins and Eliza had fallen in love and got married. So the title is ironical. So actually it is a problem play which addresses, so actually it is a problem play which addresses a bigger issue, a world problem of education. We know there are so many troubles faced by a teacher who sets out to fight ignorance with students, as Higgins was with regard to Eliza. A teacher, what he or she does, a teacher leads students towards a new way of life by educating them. And then the teacher is compelled to leave them at the entrance of their new life to go on by themselves. They need to move on from there by themselves. But what actually happens is it produces some kind of discontent in students with the existing circumstances. They must have been living another life. But after gaining this knowledge, our perspective, students' perspective changed. Everything will change after gaining knowledge. So they'll feel some kind of discontent with the existing circumstances and creates a desire for a different Elisa also, this girl, this flower seller girl also. She's no more the same girl which she was before. So the playwright addresses this bigger issue, the world problem of education using a lighter theme. Lighter theme is the usage of English language. English was to him a beautiful language. I'm talking about the author, the playwright. English was to him a beautiful language and the human voice a beautiful instrument. He couldn't bear to have beautiful things made ugly. That's why he's of this opinion. He was disgusted by the harsh and slovenly, the untidy speech of many people in England. The main reason for it is confusion, the spelling, as I told you before. That was the main reason. So he thought introduce phonetic alphabet would solve the main problem. Because if phonetic alphabets are introduced, people will start having the same pronunciation. That spelling confusion won't arise. And thereby, the author, this playwright, believed it would break the social class distinctions. It will break down the class distinctions. So it's a very serious theme. Then the author Bernard Shaw is also called a Fabian feminist. When we read the play, you'll come to know that later. The feminist ideals which he has which, we know that as our mouthpieces for his personal opinions. So it is evident in that play. So he's also called a Fabian, relating to the Fabian society, a Fabian feminist. And I'll quote his words. He says, quote, "The denial of any fundamental rights to a woman is really a violation of the soul and an attack on that sacred part of life which is common to all of us," unquote. So in this play, Pygmalion also, he calls attention to femininity and gender roles. We know that there are two parallel stories of Pygmalion the sculptor and Higgins the phonetician. So both these stories show how unrealistic and unnatural the expectations that society often for women. Here, Pygmalion's, the sculptor's perfect woman, the statue, the perfect woman, can only be attained through an artificial statue, which is the other women. So that's more unrealistic. Then Higgins and Colonel Pickering, the linguistic friend, the friend who is the other friend who is a linguist, they create a real and noble lady of British society. They're trying for that through their experiment. They don't accept Elisa as such. They're trying to change her for those ideals, the so-called feminine ideals, or the perfect woman image. So Pygmalion play shows all these picture of unrealistic ideals. Another important character is there, Alfred Doolittle. That is Elisa's father character. His characterization is used for satirizing middle class morality. It is very important issue which he has addressed. So through this character, Alfred Doolittle, Elisa's father character, Bernard Shaw satirizes middle class morality, class distinctions, and class manners. We have all these so-called middle class moral codes, class distinctions, and manners. Need to behave like this, need to appear like this. He satirizes all those things through this character. So this character, the father character of Elisa, he is portrayed as a garbage collector, or even we can call him as a dustman, one who collects ashes and all, or garbage. That's his job, and this character is completely happy with that, because according to him, the lower class doesn't mind its lack of moral, and points out that when you live in poverty, one can't afford to have morals. So he's free from all fears and conscience. and he doesn't think before he talks, and his words carefully. He speaks whatever comes to his mind. So when his daughter Elisa is aspiring to become a member of, father feels delighted that his job doesn't make him subjected to any dreadful middle class morality codes. Means the morality codes means we need to dress well, we need to be very clean, then being married, speaking properly, so many things. But in the last act of the play, see that this father character, he gets forced into the role of electoral reforms, and he must then adopt middle class morality. So you may be wondering how he becomes a lecturer of moral reforms, because he can speak in a very good way, even better than Higgins. He can communicate properly. So that's how he gets a chance. Details you may get while reading that play. So when he gets that new job, he is compelled to adopt that middle class morality codes. So this character, it criticizes the flawed social hierarchy and believes wealth and class don't mean a good life. And each class comes with its merits and demerits. It's all very important issues that he is addressing. So this play, even though it looks like a very lighter theme, it talks about so many important problems which we have in our society. So it's a play about the powers of language and the connections between language and social class. The wealthier social classes simply claim that theirs is the right way to speak. In our society, there are some quotes like that. Wealthy people think that theirs is the right way to speak. So this play explores the possibilities for those clever people like Higgins and Colonel Pickering to exploit the connection between social class and speech. How do they do that? Through the character Elisa. So through Elisa, they are able to use this to their advantage of fooling this elite society and successfully passing Elisa off as a noble lady, as a Dutch in their words, through performance. She didn't change. She didn't change her identity. She didn't change her personality, anything. But she was just performing like what Higgins was telling her. Higgins knew what to do exactly. So she was just uh, doing the things according to the instructions of Higgins. So that means this connection between language and social class, um, it's all arbitrary. There is nothing static as such. So they brought out that idea through their experiment. This play also explores how social identity is formed not only through patterns of speech but also through external appearances. This play leaves a question before us. Even though we change our appearance, can anyone really ever change? Does that appearance matter so much? Is there anything natural about class identity at all? So they play wholly criticizes all the Victorian morals and class distinctions of social class. You know, that the class distinctions in our society, usually it is enforced through manners, and the play shows how the belief that one social class and manners natural is false. We believe that social class and manners all come it's all natural, but it's all false ideas. It can also be learned and performed. It's not that instinctual thing. It can all be learned and performed. So it's all a matter of habit. Our social identity or the manners which we talk about, it's all a matter of habit. There's no right or wrong. It all are just a matter of cultural habits. It all depends on the culture, various cultures. We have a lot of different cultures in this world. So good manners, bad manners, it's all like culturally constructed thing. So it is it's very evident because different cultures have different notions of polite behavior. So this is what I plan to discuss with you. Hope it is clear for you. If any part is not clear for you, please unmute, and or Amit, you can.
Thank you, Dr. Athia. Now the session is open for questions. Do you have questions? Anyone can ask questions regarding this clay. You just unmute your button and ask Dr. Athia.
I have given only an introduction. I didn't intend to give the summary. I just wanted to give the background information.
Anyone, please, if you have questions, you can ask, madam. Anyone? I don't think so. There will be any questions regarding this.
Okay.
So thank you for your time and this
No problem.
wonderful lecture. Okay, and with this we'll end our this 2-day online special lectures. I thank every speakers, all the 3 speakers, starting from yesterday, Dr. Pinati, Sri Hemant Kumar, and Dr. Athya Shashidharan also, for sparing their time and sharing with us their views on this particular topics. Thank you everyone for participating and making this event successful. So we'll provide the feedback link for certificate in your email ID, registered email ID. Very shortly, I'll send the feedback link to the registered email IDs you have provided. Thank you. Thank you all for making this event successful.
Thank you everyone for your patience. Thank you.
you